Well, today's study is in Matthew chapter 19, starting verse 1. It came to pass that when Jesus had finished these things, he departed from Galilee, came to the coast of Judea beyond Jordan. So Jesus is making his way toward Jerusalem. The time is coming close for him to go to the cross. So the journey now really begins more and more toward. He's told them what's coming, and now physically the journey begins toward the cross. And great multitudes followed him, and he healed them there. So, when Jesus was there, he never had any trouble drawing a crowd. Now, sometimes the crowd would gather, and then Jesus would say things that were very difficult and things that they didn't want to hear, and so that would sometimes cause that crowd to dissipate fairly quickly. But Jesus was always able to draw a crowd. There were always people around to hear the things he said and to experience the power of God that was on him, the anointing of God, as he healed many. And so those folks come and they're healed. But at the same time, there were those there wanting to hear him. There were those there wanting to experience healing from him. At the same time, the Pharisees also would come along, and they weren't there to receive anything, and they weren't there to really learn anything, and they weren't there to to even discern things. They weren't there. You would think they would see this man and would be there to kind of discern. Is this the Messiah come? Because he sure shows a lot of the signs, but instead they were constantly there to debate, to challenge. And as Jesus is healing and delivering and saving, the Pharisees are debating. And if we're not careful, even in today's time in church, we can, and I believe we should be discerning, and I think there's nothing wrong with debate to a point. But if we do more debating than we are doing trying to see folks restored and healed and saved, then we're getting our focus in the wrong place. We're getting caught up in the wrong things. Our priorities are out of order. Jesus' priorities are always to minister to people, to speak truth into their lives, to see them restored, not just to rebuke them or to prove how much holier we are than them, but to be a people who are here to help others come to Christ, to be restored, to experience his salvation, to experience his love and his mercy. And so the Pharisees come and they're tempting him, and they say unto him, isn't it funny, he's there and people are being healed, good things are happening. What do they bring up? They start in on, is it lawful for a man to put away his wife for every cause? Now, you notice what they say here, for every cause, because at the time this was happening, divorce and remarriage was a hot button issue among the Jews. There were two rabbis, and here's where you have to kind of step outside of Scripture and do some historical study. But there were two rabbis, one named Hillel, who was a very liberal rabbi. Okay. And so on his side, he basically said that divorce could happen for any reason, and especially initiated by a man. It was very difficult for a woman to get a divorce during those times. Very different from today's time. But these men could, see a woman who they like better than their wife and declare that his wife had let herself get too unattractive and use that as justification to get a divorce. And even the process of divorce became very easy. There's some Muslim countries even now who their marriages and divorces are very easily entered into and very easily gotten out of in some of these countries. You have many you have some marriages within Muslim countries, and even in Muslims who come to America, who quote unquote take on a wife, and yet they have a wedding ceremony, but they don't they may do it in the mosque but not even get a marriage license. And so they enter into this, but then they're able to get out of it really quickly. And so one of the stories I read concerning the Jews was that they could say to their wife, "I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you." Say it 3 times, and they were in some circles, some areas that was it. They were divorced, and of course these men had far more ability to keep their money. Women did not have the rights that they have today. And by the way, much of the blessings that women have today are due to Christian teaching, due to Jesus' teaching and how he lifted women up and used women for God's glory, to share messages of the gospel, to let them know he was resurrected. I mean, we see Jesus, care, and even though there are roles for men that God assigns and roles for women, God doesn't value men above women. He just has different roles for us to play, which is one of the reasons in our culture right now there's such an attack on gender. It's really an attack on God's very creation. Okay, so when you see all this stuff about transgenderism, and this is just a satanic attack to try to undo God's design. There's always a spiritual force. There are always spiritual forces behind the things that are going on. So when you see just things that initially appear insane, okay, like men competing in women's sports and wrestling and boxing and these kind of things, especially where they're going to overpower these women. This push for, on one hand, let's have women's rights and let's exalt women, and on the other hand, you say, well, there is no gender, or people can choose what gender they want to be, and so it's absolute insanity. And that's what happens though when you get outside of God's design for things, and man begins to try to design their own way of doing things. You end up with the mess that we're kind of into now in our society, and it's a crazy thing that we won't just submit to God's will. I mean, people for 2,000 years. I mean, the things we're seeing right now are just, there were seasons in Rome and different things where you saw a semblance of some of this, but we're seeing things today that just absolute, a shaking of the fist in the face of God, and saying, we are not going to follow your ways. And so so they come to Jesus, and you have this one who's Hillel, who's very liberal. You can get divorced for any reason whatsoever, pretty much, and made it very easy. Then you had a man named Shammai, who basically said there were no grounds for divorce. That if you get, so he was to the ultra conservative side, that there was never any grounds for divorce, and attempted to make divorce impossible. Okay, so they come to Jesus. Okay, Jesus, you tell us what the situation is here. And he answered and said to them, have you not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? So we see Jesus confirming the Genesis creation account. Genesis is so important, guys. If we get away from Genesis, and the creation, then what that does is that it kind of destroys the gospel. I've even had Christians over the years say, well, just preach the gospel and don't worry about creationism. Don't worry about what Genesis says, But the thing is, guys, if we take away the foundational things, we take away the things found in Genesis and the literal account of creation there, and we take that away. What we do is we remove those. Just even the basic premise that God exists, that he created the world, that we're accountable to him, that he created it for man. I mean, there's so many day-to-day things that are impacted by whether God created this world and he created it for man. With our climate change things, the global warming things, if you don't believe that, then you're going to make certain decisions and push for things that go against go against this teaching. And so if you do believe it, then you have a different worldview. I mean, Genesis is so important, and I think it's one of the reasons why we've seen such a downfall in our societies, because we've been teaching evolution, we've been teaching a Big Bang theory. We've gotten away from what the Bible says, how the Bible says that creation has come about, and we've embraced this secular humanist view of how we were made and all this. And because of that, we're seeing a turning away from not only the science of the Bible, which is that creation account, but the morality of the Bible is being forsaken as well. So we've got to get back to Genesis, and I encourage you to look up Ken Ham's ministry, Answers in Genesis. There's lots of resources on his website. They're the ones who made the Ark encounter in Kentucky. And I really want to go there someday. If you get a chance, I encourage you to do that. But his whole push is that the Genesis story is so important to teach our kids, to let them know how we came about, to not neglect that. In Genesis, we find the fall of man. We find God's original intent of, as he put man on the planet, as to have dominion, that man was above. I mean, so many principles that are being attacked right now, are found in the book of Genesis. And so we need to have a good knowledge of the book and what it says. So Jesus confirms it. So those that say, well, it doesn't matter because, we just preach the gospel. Well, Jesus confirms. We just preach the gospel. We're not going to worry about, well, Jesus confirms it. So, if you're going to follow Jesus, and you're going to follow his teachings, then you need to believe what he says about creation, and that God created them male and female. He has gender. There are only two genders, okay? And yes, there are anomalies. There are some that have genetic defects, but still, when you go at the level of looking at the chromosomes, you'll find that they can discern male and female, even with those who have distorted or multiple parts. They're still at a chromosomal level. Doctors can check and say, okay, well, you're really a male with female characteristics, okay, or vice versa. But they're still at a chromosomal level. They can determine that now. So God created male and female. By the way, sin is what brought about the problems we have. Okay, so Adam and Eve were the perfect, perfectly created humans, and if sin crept in, guess what? Our genetic problems began because of sin. And so he says, for this cause shall a man leave father and mother, shall cleave to his wife, and the twain of two, that means two, shall be one flesh. And so God's intention is one man, one woman for life in a marriage. That's his plan. He didn't give Adam multiple choices, okay? He didn't give Eve multiple choices. He put a man and a woman there in the garden, and that's the symbol that we're to follow after, that we, as men, find one woman, and we marry her, and we spend the rest of our life with her. That's God's, now let me say this, that's God's ideal plan. Now, that doesn't always happen, doesn't always work out, for various reasons, most of the time because of sin on the part of either one or the other or both, okay? So, but that's God's perfect plan. God lays out in the Word what his perfect plan for us is, and, if we would just live that way, and, all of us would, then, we'd have utopia here, but obviously we don't. Sin is in our hearts, and we make selfish decisions, and sometimes divorces take place, and these kind of things happen. So, but what Jesus is doing here is he's laying out, before he answers them, he's laying out God's perfect plan, which is one man, one woman for life, leave the parents. That's something that, today seems like, you got folks get married, don't even leave their parents, they at all, Now, if you're taking care of them, it's one thing, but, if you're just mooching off of them, need to get that right, need to, have your own family when you can do that. He says, wherefore there are no more twain but one flesh. So they're coming together physically and spiritually, emotionally, mentally. I mean, it's a oneness. Husband and wife are to come together and unite and not be unequally yoked. And as a Christian, I believe you should marry another Christian. I think that's important, that we marry somebody who's spiritually on the same page that we are. So the two, they become one flesh, wherefore there are no more twain but one flesh. What, therefore, God hath joined together, let no man put asunder. We need to be careful not to tempt to divide that which God has joined. So, if you have a couple who's having marital problems, and one of them comes to you for advice, your initial response ought to be, okay, let's pray about this, and how can I help that you guys can work this out, that you can keep your marriage together, you can keep your family together. Sadly, you'll have people who will actually immediately encourage somebody when they're having marital problems. Well, there's better men out there, there's better women out there. You just need to get a divorce. Y'all, this is gone, and they encourage that. We should not encourage that. We should be initially, at least, attempting to help that person work that out. And I believe we'll be accountable before God if we're somebody who meddles in people's marriages or tries to mess up or destroy people's marriages. And there are people out there like that. There are people out there who are unhappy themselves. And I say this because I've known some of them who have family who's been this way, and who gets involved in other people's marriages that may be struggling a little bit. And instead of encouraging them and praying for them and trying to help them to find a solution to the trouble, they give them bad counsel, and they actually contribute to a divorce of a marriage that might otherwise have been able to be saved and restored. And so we should do our best to help people stay together and work their problems out, because if they get out of that if they get out of that marriage and they get remarried, guess what? They're going to have a whole other set of problems they're going to have to work through and figure out first what problems those are, and then figure out how to deal with that and learn this person and all this. And so God's perfect plans: one man, one woman for life, not multiple women, not a man and a man, not thruples is a new terminology I heard the other day. God's plan is one man, one woman for life. That's His perfect plan. So then they say to him, why did Moses then command to give a writing of divorcement to put her away? Now you recognize that adultery. Well, let me. I'm getting ahead of myself. So he said, why did Moses then give opportunity for divorce? Okay, why did he write this? If this is God's perfect plan? And he said to them, Moses, because the hardness of your hearts suffered you to put away your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. He said, look, it was, God has allowed for divorce, but He's not for divorce. God has allowed it, but He would rather you work things out, if possible. But because of sin, because of the hardness of your hearts and sin, God has allowed for things. Look, God over, and when you look at the Bible, you'll find that God has allowed things to happen, but it doesn't mean it's His perfect will. It doesn't mean it's His perfect plan for that, to happen. I mean, there was slavery at times in the Bible, and it was much different than the slavery that we saw in this country. People try to say that, and they go, well, that the slavery in the Bible was more of typically a bond servant type of slavery, but He did allow where there was an agreement made, and then sometimes one in that agreement began to abuse that, okay, and this kind of thing. But it was different. There were certain laws in place and stuff like that. But again, people say, well, why would He even allow that? Well, He allowed certain things to take place, okay, in His sovereignty. He allowed it, and even used some bad things to bring good things out of it. And He continues to do that. There are things God allows today that are not in His will. I mean, your life, knowing your life, there's things that God has allowed you to do, and you think, well, I know, but that wasn't God's perfect plan for me. And so He allowed it, and He even gave Moses instruction on giving laws for it, because He recognized that there were going to be people that were going to do it, regardless of whether it was right or wrong. So Jesus said, though, in the beginning it was not so. It wasn't God's perfect plan. And I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, except it be for fornication, and marry another, committeth adultery, and whoso marrieth her, which put her away, doth commit adultery. So Jesus said, look, I would say to you that the reason to if you're going to get a divorce will be because of fornication, because of adultery committed. Um, there was a sexual act that took place, and then doesn't mean you have to get a divorce. Okay, doesn't mean that because a spouse cheats that you're required by God to get a divorce, but it means that divorce is allowed under those circumstances. Now, forgiveness is also allowed, and sometimes I've known over the years people who were in a marriage who there was adultery and fornication involved, and who ended up restoring their marriage and actually having a stronger marriage out of that, because they were able to forgive. They were able to then examine what brought that on, and they were actually able to have a stronger marriage after than they were before. I know multiple couples personally that this has happened to, and God has blessed them and blessed their marriage as they work to keep it together. Okay, and I know others who, that's happened, and for whatever reason the marriage did not work out. And by the way, you can't make somebody stay with you. I knew a pastor whose wife just left him and his kids, and had an affair, and got on drugs, and this wife just they moved to a new town, got involved with some people in that town, met this guy, and it was crazy. Everybody was shocked by it, and that pastor did not want divorce. He was willing to forgive his wife, but she was unwilling to work it out, and so she abandoned him and their kids. It was such a sad thing to go through, and sadly the pastor was treated horribly by some people, because they blamed him for his wife's adulterous actions, and he was ready to admit that he wasn't a perfect husband, but he didn't cheat on her, and again, there's no perfect marriage, there's no perfect spouse. Okay, so those out there that are get in a relationship, get married, and then somebody, they start thinking, well, I could have done better. Well, you made the decision to marry this person, and you need to do your best to make that marriage work. If you focus more on loving that person with the love of Jesus than you are trying to make them out to be the fulfillment of what you want, there are people out there that want people to fulfill them when only God can fulfill them. And when people fall short of that, and they're going to, then they start looking for somebody else to do that for them. And it ain't ever going to happen. Jesus talked about this with the woman at the well. He said, "Where's your husband?" And she said, "It's not here." And he said, "Well, I don't have a husband." He said, "No, you've had 5 husbands, and then the guy you're with now is not your husband." And and what Jesus was Jesus wasn't afraid to call it out, what it was. But this woman had been, to quote an old song, looking for love in all the wrong places, okay? She needed a relationship with God first, and she was looking for something in men that can only be found in God. There are people out there who look for something in people that only can be found in God. So Jesus talks about this with the adultery, fornication. His disciples saying to him, verse 10, "If the case of the man be so with his wife, it is not good to marry." Because listen, adultery is let me go to verse 9. I think I skipped that. "I say unto you, whosoever put away his wife, except be for fornication, shall marry another, committeth adultery, and whoso marrieth her is put away, doth commit adultery." So then the disciples said, "Would it be better just not to marry than do this?" The punishment for adultery during the Old Testament days was death, and that's why the woman caught in the act of adultery was brought to Jesus to have her stoned to death, because she committed adultery. So there was somebody married, probably the man that she was with, and she was involved in it, and so they wanted to stone her. But Jesus is a God of grace and mercy, and he comes and says, "Listen, whoever is without sin, let him cast the first stone." And of course they all walked away because they all had adultery in their heart. The Bible tells us this, okay? So for those who want to condemn people who who get divorced and get remarried and say that they're, living in perpetual adultery. Well, the Bible says if you have lust in your heart towards somebody, then you've already committed adultery with them in your heart. So, if you want to hold to that standard, then guess what? We're all adulterers at heart. Okay, it doesn't mean we act on it, but it means we have the potential in us, and there are desires in us that we've got to resist. But at times that we give into, and that's where grace and mercy have to come in, because we fail at this. We fall into sin at times, and make the decision to sin. And so as he speaks here, he talks about fornication. People will ask me at times too, well, Brother Jason, what about abandonment? Obviously, if somebody abandons you, I think Jesus, one of the reasons he makes his statement in the way he does here is because of the issue of the time and the debate between these two men about easy divorce versus no divorce at all. But if abandonment happens, what does a person do? Especially in this day where a woman can file for divorce, a man, either party can file for divorce, and there's times there's nothing you can do about that. So, it's just how it is. There'll be cases of abuse, okay, which really is, to me, almost a mental adultery, where you have a person who's abusing their wife and kids. If a woman comes to me and says, Brother Jason, I'm being abused, and she's fearful for her life, or fearful for the life of her kids, and then you think about the Bible when it talks about adultery toward God. It wasn't a physical adultery; it was a spiritual adultery. It was a mental decision that the people of Israel had walked away from God and walked after other things, okay, and abused their relationship with God. And so, if I have a woman come to me that way, I'm gonna tell her to get out of that situation. Make some demands on her husband, to get counseling, to get help, but not to stay in a situation where her life is threatened or the lives of her children are threatened. That's the advice I'm going to give her. Okay, and so someone say, well, what if? Well, there is still grace and mercy if we do something that's against the Bible. It doesn't mean we're living in a perpetual act of adultery. He says all men cannot receive this saying save they to whom it is given. Now, I had a situation years ago where a man had went through a marriage, and he was coming to my church in Lake City, had been married, had been divorced, and remarried, and had a child. And his daddy was a preacher of a denomination that told him that unless he divorced his current wife, okay, so another divorce, and got back with his first wife, who had remarried and who had left the state, and who was continuing to cheat on her husband because he had multiple, mutual friends with her. So she was just an adulterous person. But his dad, who's a preacher in a certain denomination, told him if he didn't remarry her, that they were both going to hell. Now, look, just because an act of adultery is committed doesn't mean you're in a lifestyle of adultery, okay? There is forgiveness of our sin. There is grace. There is mercy, okay? The Bible tells us that God gave Israel a bill of divorcement. Now, is God a sinner because he gave Israel, who is his spiritual wife, a bill of divorcement? No, he's not. Israel walked away from God, and so God says, okay, I'm giving you a bill of divorcement. God wasn't unfaithful, Israel was, okay? And so there are situations where they're out of our control, and even if we make a mistake, and I'll say this, even if a person commits sin, and then down the road, and they get remarried, and they realize, you know what, that was sin what I did, and I repent of it, and I'm sorry for it, but I'm in this marriage now, and I'm going to redeem this marriage. I want God to redeem it, and they commit that marriage to God. We can't go back and fix our past. We can't go back and undo things that have been done, but we can turn our lives over to God. We can turn our marriages over to God. We can turn our families over to God. And God can oftentimes take things that didn't start in the best way, but redeem them and use them for His glory and His honor. And I've seen Him do it many times over the years. So many times I can't count. He said, all men can't receive the same. There are some born eunuchs, some eunuchs which are so born from the mother's womb, and there are some eunuchs which were made eunuchs of men. There are some eunuchs that are made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven's sake. He that is able to receive it, let him receive it. So, the eunuch is, unable to have a sexual relationship with somebody, and so some were born that way, and they just don't, they're not able to do that. Others were castrated. Others were made eunuchs. We find that in the scripture, where some taken captive, and they were made that way because they didn't want their focus divided. And many times servants were done that way, but some make the decision, you know what, I'm not going to get married. I'm just going to devote my life to the gospel. And he says some can receive it and some cannot. Paul received that. Now, some have said, well, they believe Paul was married early on because of the Sanhedrin and because of his knowledge of marriage, and that his wife abandoned him when he was saved. But we don't have that in the Bible. A lot of that's kind of speculation. And so I don't know whether he was or he wasn't, but I know from the time we meet Paul, Paul has completely committed himself to the Lord and to the work of the Lord. And so he's not married then. But Philip, on the other hand, was married, who's an evangelist and a deacon. And Philip had 4 daughters who prophesied. Sometimes your greatest ministry is the evangelism ministry, where you're out and you're sharing the gospel with people. And we all should do the work of an evangelist. But for the married couple and the married person, your ultimate ministry is that you train up and raise up kids that know Jesus, that you can send out into a lost and dying world to be a light and be salt to the world and to point the way toward Jesus. That doesn't mean you're not to win others to Christ, because you are. But it means that your primary ministry, your greatest ministry, is going to be in the children you raise up to be servants of the Lord. And in fact, he goes right into, then there were brought unto him little children. He should put hands on them and pray. The disciples rebuked them. Talked about this the other day. Disciples sometimes didn't want the kids around. But Jesus says, suffer the little children, forbid them not to come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. And he laid hands on them and departed hence. Oftentimes in divorce, the ones that hurt the most are not the parents, not the spouses, but it's the children. And I think it's amazing that Jesus goes right to the children after he talks about divorce and lays hands on them, and he comforts them. And for kids who've been through divorce, they need the comfort of Jesus, and thankfully that comfort is always there. And guys, we're going to close at that. God bless y'all. Hope you have a great night. We'll see you tomorrow.